So let me do so, and welcome everybody to this short series about unlocking local action, where we're really exploring different ways to engage the community in taking climate action locally. My name is Rick Casali, and I'm a trustee of Carbon Copy. A couple of housekeeping rules. We are recording this chat, and it'll be available on catch up at carboncopy.eco. That's .eco. There's a chat and a Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. Please do type in your questions and I'll pass on as many as I can. Hopefully we can get them all answered. I'm delighted today to introduce you to Laura Cristea. She has, prior to her current role, been leading various big behavioral change programs with the NSU, National Union of Students. And done a lot of that before moving on to her current role, where she's the communications lead at Energise. And Energise is, I want to call you like an energy and carbon management company, consulting company, and you are offering advice and support across all the sectors, private, public, and third sector. And it's really fantastic to have someone with a corporate and a company perspective, because we need obviously companies as well as councils and communities around the table at the same time to address climate action. So today she's going to talk to us about a really exciting new campaign in the town where they are based. And I won't steal your thunder, so I'll pass you over to Laura. I think you have a few slides to share, and then take it away.
I do. Thanks, Rick. That was a lovely introduction. I'd welcome if you could let me know just, we can see your slides, so I don't do the usual. Can you see my slide?
I can see your slides.
There we go. Okay, thanks. So yeah, thank you so much for that intro, and thanks so much for joining us. I am working for Energise, but you'll see that the campaign I'm here to talk about is not under our ownership at all, but we are just the catalyst for helping it happen. And yeah, like fundamentally, it is centered around behavior change within our community. So let's just get cracking, because I won't spend a lot of time on the slides, just so we can have some time for Q&A and conversation afterwards. I'm just gonna really tell you briefly what our community is about, and what the name of our future campaign is, and a little bit about the upcoming branding, a few teasers if you want, and then our solutions for both the SME mainly, so the business side of our town, as well as the domestic. And then again, some teasers for what we're planning for the future. So yeah, we're based in Cambridgeshire. That's where our office is as well, in Neots. It's a 30,000 strong community, and the fundamentals of it is that we're really, really ambitious, and together with some council women and men and the mayor, as well as some business leaders, nonprofit organizations, we've worked together for well over a year now, actually, to develop what our new environmental ambition for the whole of the town is, and basically commit ourselves to a target of net zero by 2030. So that's how we form Net Zero. Please accept the pun. I was going to say, excuse the pun. I will not apologize for it. I think it's great.
I agree.
So we want to launch the campaign publicly this coming March, and highlight the stories that our locals have, especially the success stories, but not so much just focus on only what's going right, because we don't want to be lacking in any realism, because it's not all going great, but that's part of the journey. And we want to acknowledge there are certain barriers that people as well as businesses have when working towards this target. So yeah, we want to make sure that, as well as our science-based targets, we are firmly anchored in the reality of the barriers as well. Basically, we do know that we have 9 years to achieve it. And while I did mention barriers there, we're actually more than hopeful that we can. The context to which what we're involved in, and I did mention that we are based in the business park in town, but we actually did supply the council, so the Neots council, with pro bono consultancy services. So we do have a good understanding already of what the data looks like and what's available to us. And we also have really good relationships there built already. And that's why I meant that I've got a few teasers of the branding there for you. We're very much still developing. You'll see that's a fairly common thread throughout my entire presentation today, because we're still very much in early stages. We haven't formally launched yet, not publicly. We are still building the website, figuring out what the pledges should look like. But the way that we designed it so far is really, really interesting to me. So crucially, it does have the community at heart. We are currently working on the governance structures to make sure that they're as representative as possible, and really putting that, like I said, at the heart of how we run the campaign. We want to make sure that we involve all likes of community organizing and campaigning that already exists in town. So it's really not at all about like reinventing the wheel here. We're very aware about just how many great projects are already happening. So we want to make sure that that's driving us, not just acknowledged. And speaking of driving, we do expect the campaign to drive a lot of change in town, whether that's, the schools, the offices of our council, community centers, recreation centers, obviously the business park and the businesses, as well as domestic households. So we do hope and expect it to drive that change. Kind of coming back to that flexibility there, we as a consultancy do have a lot of experience delivering change for a variety of sectors. And so we know that everyone works differently, everyone works towards like different priorities. We do really want to make sure that we build in systems that allow for internal flexibility, that we don't just apply a really wide brushstroke over everything in town. And finally, on the driving innovation point, I actually, while I was preparing for this, kind of had a little reflection moment, and I realized it kind of already has driven innovation, because we're of course, I do know that we're still in fairly early stages of developing our yearly science-based targets. However, on the other front of actually delivering that, we've managed to make a lot of progress thanks to Need Zero on 2 new services that I hope will be able to help the campaign. And that's what I'm going to focus on for the next couple of minutes, the 2 services that are going to be at the core of it, which are the Net Zero Club and Systemic. So first off, the Net Zero Club. So the club is basically our solution to help SMEs. It has 3 levels of membership, and that corresponds to a different level of support package. And that's just to make sure that we cover every size of status of various companies' kind of pathway to net zero. And yes, just kind of meant to be as affordable and as accessible as possible, because obviously different businesses, different needs, and different access points. Apart from the support they receive through joining the club and making it easier for them to kind of move the needle towards net zero targets, it's also an accreditation scheme. So it has it works on a 5-level basis. So it goes from, okay, we acknowledge you're committed to it, to you manage to offset the emissions you weren't able to reduce, then to verified reduction, to carbon neutrality, and to net zero. Now, there's a lot of terminology in here that I really wish we had more time to delve into. Perhaps we can. I'm more than happy to follow up either with some resources or with some blog of sorts that actually clarifies the difference between carbon neutrality and net zero, for example. But it's the progress between them that the Net Zero Club accredits. So yeah, recognition will be validated by an independent body. What the screenshot on the left there does is it gives a glimpse into the software that we use to actually track, monitor, and improve on the data that the SMEs that take part in the club provide us with or input into the software themselves. we've done a lot of work over the past few months to improve this and to just make it as user-friendly as possible. And now it includes a benchmarking tool as well. You'll be able to see that on the right-hand side there. It also has a lot of case studies, a lot of free guides and resources, questionnaires to kind of, again, assess your status at different points throughout your journey. So it's packed full of resources. So that's our solution for the business side of town. We hope that we'll be able to register as many of the businesses in the club and support them on the journey using this piece of software, and as well as, of course, our own internal consultancy. Now, for domestic households on the other side of things, so we have Systemic. As you can actually tell from this very slide, much less text on here than on the previous one. And the reason for that is that it's really not a service we're ready to launch yet. We do have a launch date penciled in, and that's supposed to fall on Earth Day, so April 22nd. Started working on organizing a virtual event to launch it. And basically what it is, hopefully the infograph on the right is giving you an indication of what it mainly does. It's an app. It's helping you not only track your domestic emissions, if you wish. So whether that's home, what do you buy into your lifestyle and food and drink, how you commute, how you travel, where you might go on holidays. And then, of course, much more importantly, how to act on that. We are very firm believers in the fact that just having access to data and clarity over what data means is going to get you half of the way there. And that's part of what Systemic does. But for me, much more interestingly, is what it can help you act on. And so it's got a little bit of healthy competition built in there. We know that from early feedback, people really like that. They like the kind of gamification of it. You can also share your journey with other households, be them neighbors or frenemies. And yeah, just hopefully engage with your lifestyle in a meaningful way, and in a way which you can track that progress for yourself. So do keep an eye on that. It very much has an accessible, free level. And so, yeah, hopefully all of us can have some fun using it. So, yeah, just kind of finally, what's next for our local approach to net zero by 2030? We're in the middle of building a few more resources. I think I mentioned the personal case studies of local success, and as well as obvious barriers that we not only need to know about but want to help with. We're developing a website. We'll include a pledge that everyone can take, and a few obvious suggestions from where to start from. We're recruiting new members for the governance boards, again coming back to how it's really, really crucial that we make sure that for the long-term sustainability of the campaign, that there's fair representation and really appropriate feed-in levels. We're still calculating our yearly science-based targets for 2021 through to 2030. That's going to be obviously ready in time for launch, and wish us luck. It's only a month or so away from launch, so yeah, it's exciting to be able to share our early stages with everyone for the first time, actually. So thank you for your patience and for your encouragement.
Well, I for one feel very honored to be one of the first to see these plans, and I was very keen to chat with you because there's still a lot going on during lockdown in terms of preparing these plans and pushing these things forward.
Absolutely.
Even if the excuse me, implementation may be a bit delayed, there's clearly a lot, and you're very busy getting some of these work streams up and running.
Yeah.
Could I just take a step back for a moment? Because in addition to all of this, I know that you and some of your colleagues have been very busy. You've just launched a report. I think it's the Net Zero Landscape.
We did,
2021.
Yeah.
Literally, I mean, it was like on Thursday or Friday of last week.
Yeah,
And
that's exactly
could you
right.
just set the stage before we then delve into the specifics of the Net
Right.
Zero campaign? How are we doing as a
Mm.
nation relative to our 2050 target?
Yeah, yeah, I think that's really important to keep in mind. I mean, we're all readily available to accept and embrace the think global, act local. But in order to think global, again, I'm coming back to the data, and I appreciate your nudge to remind people. I think actually because we did put together a presentation last week for another webinar, perhaps I'll just take 30 seconds to share that slide again, because I think it's helpful to have that visualization.
Yeah.
So if you give me literally 1 second, basically what we did with the landscape report is look at all the current existing policy and measures that the government nationally, but also local authorities need to implement in order for the UK to hopefully do its
Yeah.
best to
Yeah.
meet its target of being net zero by 2050. So in that context, hopefully the slide I'm presenting
Yeah.
now can help visualize things a little bit, because it really just shows the impact that we still need to have. There's a very big question mark there over, are we even halfway there? And of course, there's a lot of interesting debates that can spark from this in terms of the lower hanging fruits. Have we already tackled it? Hopefully not all of it, because then that would really slow down progress. But yeah, we're actually like less than halfway in terms of emission reductions as a country overall, with the available data that we currently have. So there's much that's needed to do for the pathway ahead. We did deliver significant results, so there's plenty to be hopeful about. But yeah, that's where it looks like now.
And I would encourage people to look at that report. It's taken a lot of effort to distill a lot of disparate sources into a really easily digestible report. One of the things that connected me to what we're about to come on to is you identify a number of common pathways, translating how we get from policies into implementation. You look across the various sectors, from health to education to local government to communities. And I think that really helps tie it down to, okay, so this example that we have at St. Neots is where the rubber hits the road and where we see some of these things coming together.
Yeah, we would like to believe that we'll be helping with our model and our example. That's the reason why I'm excited to be part of this series this week, as well as hopefully more in the future. And yeah, that's why we should all kind of root for us, keep our fingers crossed. That is gonna go to plan, and that the local community is gonna keep as active of a role in planning as they have so far.
Yeah. Now, few different questions. My first is, you mentioned the importance of having a governance structure so that you make sure, obviously, you've got fair representation and you've got the key stakeholders. How are you going about recruiting those people, and who right now, it might be fluid, but who are you thinking in terms of the types of stakeholders that should be coming together representing the town?
It's really interesting work in progress. So the kind of like the latest conversations we've had in the planning meetings, they've all stemmed from the fact that so far it's just been the same types involved, and that's just a reality that we need to acknowledge and kind of move on from in a constructive way, in which we can approach people that might have not necessarily traditionally been part of what they might see, or like another boring like local planning meeting. Having worked in the student movement for so many years before, I personally have no worries about it. I know that young people and that students are actually like really keen to get involved with this like local political policy stuff. So I'm personally not worried, and that's exactly the kind of people that I'm really keen to focus on bringing along. And we have a lot of local campaigners that we already know of, because I did mention we're town of 30,000 people.
Mm.
For others who might be on the call today, who might live in a similar community, you might know that actually not that many people. You'll kind of know
But
it
you have a
most.
mayor, don't you? You have a mayor.
Have a mayor, and Stephen is really, really one of the biggest driving forces behind this. He luckily also has a lot of really good connections due to his many like mayoral duties and the events that he's attending to other non-profit organizations in town. So far we've engaged with a few businesses, so we don't want to make it very kind of business led, but rather equal it out. So that's some of the key categories, I guess, that we're focusing on bringing along and inviting to be part of our steering groups. We'll probably have a couple at least of steering groups that will feed into the main governance. So that's something that we're really precious about getting right from the head start.
We had that's very helpful, thank you. We had a really interesting, or it's a pertinent question yesterday about how do you measure success for campaigns like this. And we're all familiar with this phrase that you should inspect what you expect. And I think the thing that strikes me about your campaign is how integral you want to try and make this carbon footprinting software. Because clearly there's a very tangible metric that's going to come out of there. And I'm wondering to what extent you have a vision for that's going to be part of the campaign, and part of the way that people will come together is through some of the numbers that are going to be generated by measuring what they're doing.
Yeah, I think where maybe usually I'd be one to jump at attaching more qualitative measures to success. I think for this campaign in particular, we're going to have to look at that quantitative element more, particularly because we're really precious about science-based targets as a company, but also as one of the forces behind the Net Zero campaign. So on the carbon side, it's going to be very much an obvious case of meeting our annual carbon reduction targets to keep us well in track for 2030. But on the engagement side of things, it's also for me going to come down to the numbers of actions taken within the systemic app, of shares, and of course domestic households as a whole involved in it as a percentage perhaps of our town. So it's very much going to be a numbers game for the success metric. Working in communications myself, I am a fan of storytelling. I'm a fan of case studies. So there's absolutely going to be an element of that, just because I really like that.
Well, and
I
also
think
that's the thing that brings the numbers to life, isn't
absolutely.
it?
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, that's going to be an element of it. But I think it's the science-based targets and the subscriptions to the services that are going to be.
And from a rollout perspective, just to have a better understanding, if I am a participating household, in addition to the app, I presume you need to have a smart meter. So there's an assumption there about smart meter installations. Similarly, for the small to medium enterprises, is there some technology that they need to have? Do they already have that? So how much infrastructure does the town need
I
in
wouldn't worry about that, just primarily because we expect, as part of some forecasting, that we're keeping our fingers crossed that is gonna happen. We're expecting this kind of technology to be installed, because you mentioned smart meters, to be installed in most households within the next 9 years, which is by the end, obviously, of our target. So it's not something that we're pressuring people into considering already, because we do expect local schemes to help with that anyways along the way. There's various other ways in which you can track your footprint. If we're talking about energy bills, is a really good start. And if we're talking about all of the other lifestyle choices, and including food and drink in this, not that food is an option, but that some choices around it certainly are. And I think that the app will you hopefully have a really user-friendly way of understanding the differences between some of those choices without you needing more than again probably a receipt, like a bill equivalent, right? Because you'd be so yeah, that's not going to be a barrier to worry about.
That's good. And then the services themselves, clearly they're under development, they're getting ready to launch, but it's that they're not in the market yet, and you're doing it in the context of this campaign. Again, is the idea that they will be available more broadly? Will there be some level of access that will be free?
Definitely.
So there'll be some service level where anybody in any town that's listening could say, well, actually, we've now got some off-the-shelf software that we can use for households and also for businesses.
Yeah, so Systemic, the domestic household solution, will have, again, various levels of access to it, but the main one is definitely free to use. So once we hopefully get really constructive feedback and attach some updates to it, once we go through the trial phase, part of our Need Zero campaign is feeding into the trial phase. It'll be in a really solid position, we hope, by May, early summertime. Obviously, the elephant in the room walks in. We were hoping to make a formal big launch of it at the local festival, which should have happened in July. There's very little evidence for that going ahead. So in the context of keeping things virtual, it's going to be a fairly similar time frame for it to be fully functional and readily available for, obviously anyone within the UK to use for their own purposes or for their campaigns purposes.
And similarly for the services for small and medium-sized enterprises.
So that's hopefully launching very soon as well. That it's a slightly shorter time frame for that, and we can start getting people's feedback on that too.
I think what would be really interesting as we keep in touch with you is tying in some of those case studies and success stories that you were talking about with the software, because again, I'm thinking about other people listening in other areas who are thinking, well, this might be very relevant to us. I think it helps a lot to not just talk about the services themselves, but to hear from some of the participants in your campaign and to see whether or not you can make this science-based, more data-driven story something that really does connect people.
Well, that's definitely going to be my mission and my job for the next few months, at least, but probably for much longer than that as we grow more and more ambitious in our delivery. But I must come back to what I was saying earlier. It's really important to me having a really good storytelling element to our community's initiative, because that's how we keep people coming back for more. so that they have plenty of confidence in what they can achieve, because they see their neighbors and their peers doing so as well.
Good. Well, we are definitely going to keep in touch and follow this story. So thank you. We're already out of time. Yeah. It's incredible how fast it goes.
It did go too quick. That's right. But thank you so much for highlighting our very early stages. It was really exciting to share some of it. I'm going to go back. I said this about your webinar Monday as well, but I left very energized. I'm going to go do the same with my Wednesday afternoon.
Excellent. And also for people that are listening, do go to the Energise website where you can get some more information on these newer services. Clearly, they're going to be rolled out, and there's something that you may be able to use too where you live. So thank you very much, Laura. It's been a pleasure. And thank you, everybody, for joining us.